Welcome to my channel. Today I'm making homemade beef vegetable soup and rosemary baguette. I am making vegetable beef soup today, and I'm using my soup starter, some sliced beef roast that I had in the freezer, some leftover roasted potatoes that I had from dinner from the other night, and I have here some chopped celery, some chopped carrots, and some chopped onions. I have my pan heating. We're going to go ahead and saute the vegetables before we put them into the slow cooker. My pan is hot, so I'm going to add a couple teaspoons, maybe a tablespoon of oil there. And then I'm going to add in my chopped vegetables. I'm going to saute these for about 5 to 7 minutes until the onions get translucent and the vegetables start to smell fragrant. I'm going to add in a little bit of salt and some freshly ground black pepper. I have my potatoes from the other night that I had roasted in the oven. I'm going to dice those up. Now I have my beef slices, and I'm going to dice those as well. My veggies have been sauteing and they are ready to go, so I'm going to go ahead and add those to the slow cooker. Next, I'm going to layer in my diced cooked potatoes and my diced cooked beef. Now that I have all of the vegetables and meat in there, I had maybe a couple tablespoons of meat sauce, pasta sauce, left over from dinner from the night before, so I'm going to go ahead and pour that into there as well. This is my soup starter. Whenever I have any leftover meat juices from roasts and things, I throw them in a gallon-size Ziploc bag. And if I have any leftover corn or tomatoes, green beans, any kind of beans, black beans or whatever, I throw them into the bag. Any leftover meat from roasts, ground beef, beef roast, sometimes pork roast, I will go ahead and put that into the bag. And then when my bag gets a quarter to a third full, I'll pull my bag out the night before and let it thaw in the refrigerator and then add other ingredients. But that's basically my soup starter. So now to the slow cooker, I'm going to add my soup starter with all the juices and leftover veggies and bits of meat. And I'll put that all into the slow cooker. So now I'll give all that a stir. And you basically want your vegetables and meats to be covered in water. So now that I know how much juices I have, I'm going to add water to that just to cover everything. I'm going to add about 2 cups of water. You could also use prepared beef stock or prepared vegetable stock if you'd like. So for each cup of water, you want to add 1 bouillon cube. So I put in 2 cups of water, I'm putting in 2 bouillon cubes. So now I'm going to set my pot into the slow cooker with the lid on for 7 to 8 hours. So once you have all your leftovers in your pot and you have all of your stock in your pot, if you still have room and you want to add more, you can always add 1 peeled fresh diced potatoes. You can add a drained can of any kind of vegetable that you like, or you can also add a small bag of mixed vegetables if you like. It's a great way to use leftovers and not waste. Add in some Italian seasonings. maybe a tablespoon or so. So now I'm gonna make the bread. I've got my vegetable soup cooking in my slow cooker. The bread is gonna take from start to finish about 3.5 hours. I'm using a bread maker. Bread is actually pretty simple to make. It's just, once you kind of get to know how to do it, it's not really that difficult. But the things that you need for this recipe, this is going to be French bread, rosemary French bread. So I'm using 3 cups of all-purpose flour. Normally they would call for bread flour, but I always use all-purpose and I think it turns out great. So 3 cups of all-purpose flour or bread flour if you have it, a tablespoon of granulated white sugar, a teaspoon of salt, 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast, and about a tablespoon of dried rosemary, and a cup plus 2 tablespoons of water. I would also recommend a thermometer because that is kind of makes the difference. Is you want to make sure that your water is between 105 and 110 degrees before you sprinkle in your yeast. Otherwise, you can either kill your yeast if it's over 110 degrees, or it won't activate the yeast if it is not warm enough. Now I've got my water to the right temperature. I'm going to sprinkle in my yeast. And I'm going to sprinkle in my sugar. Going to let that set here for a few minutes. I'm going to let it set here for a few minutes. It should get kind of puffy and a little bit foamy, and that's how you know that your yeast has been proofed. Okay, my yeast has started to do its thing, so I'm going to add in my flour. I'm just going to spoon it in here carefully. And I'm following the directions of my bread maker on how you put the list of ingredients, the way you put your ingredients in. So normally in your bread maker, it will ask you to put your wet ingredients on the bottom first, and then just add your dry ingredients on top. Then I'm going to sprinkle on my salt and sprinkle in my herbs. I have rosemary, but you can use whatever herbs you want, or you don't have to use any at all. Then I'm going to place this into my bread maker and put it on the dough cycle because I want to make French bread loaf, and I prefer it to be baked in the oven as opposed to being baked in the bread machine. But you can do it either way. So I'm going to put it in my bread machine, and the dough cycle is about 1.5 hours. When it's ready, it should be doubled in size. I'll take it out, knead it, put it into my loaf shape that I want to make it into, let it rise for another hour, and then it'll be ready to brush with oil and pop into the oven for 30 minutes. My bread is done in the bread maker, so it was on the dough cycle for about 1.5 hours. And I'm going to take the dough out. Now it's doubled in size. So that's the first rise. I'm going to take it out and knead it on my pastry sheet with some flour. Normally you put your flour down first before you put your dough down, but I forgot. So, all right, so I got all my dough out here. I'm going to start kneading it. So you take the top and you roll it, and you roll it to the side, and you got to work that flour in. So it should be it shouldn't be very tacky, sticky when you're done kneading it. I kneaded it, I don't know, for about a couple minutes, maybe a few minutes. And I've got parchment paper, so I have this loaf pan, this double loaf pan for French bread. And I've already cut my parchment paper to lay down in there. And I'm going to cut my loaf in half. And I'm going to take each half and roll it into kind of form it into a long, thin loaf. Now these will be kind of small loaves. If you wanted 2 really big loaves like you buy in the store, this would probably make 1 really big loaf. And so if you were doing that, you might want to double the recipe if you have a double loaf pan like this. All right, then you brush it with olive oil. I'm just going to dump a little in my hands, and I'm going to roll the dough around in my hands in olive oil and then lay it in my pan. So now I'm going to take a thin, clean towel, kitchen towel, and I'm going to run it under really hot water in the faucet, as hot as I can stand it with my hands. And I'm going to get it all wet, wring it out, and lay it over top of the bread. So I've got my kitchen towel nice and hot, and I'm going to leave this in a warm place to rise for about an hour. And then after they've risen, I'll brush them with olive oil and put them in the oven. All right, I've pulled my towel off my bread, and it is, and I brushed with a little oil, and I'm going to just sprinkle a little salt on the top for a nice little crust. Okay, and so I'm going to go ahead and put that in my oven. It's 375 degree oven for about 30 minutes. The soup is done. We're just getting ready to serve it. I had some leftover pasta. I'm just going to add this real quick to give it a chance to warm up. I guess I should say leftover cooked pasta. And so I put that in the slow cooker to warm up while I cut the bread. So the bread is ready and out of the oven. I'm gonna go grab that. Oh, it smells so good. All right, it's nice and crusty on the outside. Get some butter on there. It's delicious. Nice and crusty on the outside, soft on the inside. A little bit of that rosemary, a little saltiness on the top of it, really nice, adds a nice touch. And then of course melted butter. I'm gonna go ahead and get some soup ready for this. So good. The beef is nice and tender. The vegetables are very well seasoned. It's just so good. And I can never duplicate these recipes when I do these soup starters because they have all kinds of different things in them every time that's different. When you have a tablespoon left over of corn, a tablespoon of green beans, like I had maybe a quarter of a serving of pasta left over, so I just blended the sauce in there and let it cook through. I think I had maybe a quarter cup of sauce, if that, and then I had I don't know, like 10 or 12 noodles, not very many, that I threw in there at the end, but it's just fabulous. You guys really should try this, and it's a great way to save money and not waste any of your food. I hope you guys enjoy this. Till next time.